Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, a Baxter Professional Services production. Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, where we're experts in nursing and experts in business. My name is Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Today's guest is Andrea Johnston. And today's episode, how one nurse turned a negative experience into a shift to make a positive impact on healthcare. Tired of feeling trapped in a job that no longer fulfills you? Is your nursing job no longer the fun-filled adventure you imagined? Find your passion again through nurse entrepreneurship. Step out into the light and come feel the sun. Join the Nurse Shark Academy today at thenurseSharkAcademy.biz and come feel the sun. And welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Today's guest is Drea Johnston of On Purpose Dream Consulting in Oregon, Wisconsin, and DreaVanessa.com as an author. Drea is a dedicated and experienced registered nurse who provides a profound 17-year perspective to consulting by influencing positive change through patient and provider dynamics and support persons' interactions. As an accomplished author, her debut book, The Struggle to Change Healthcare, One Woman's Dream for the Future of Nursing, reflects her commitment to addressing challenges in the nursing industry and proposing sustainable solutions. In her second book, Escaped Oblivion, Untethered, Traumatized, and Alone, Facing the Real World, a true story of resilience, she delves into personal resilience after many adverse life experiences. We're going to hear more about her nursing journey and her journey into entrepreneurship as we go along. And as always, her information and bio will be linked in our show notes. So welcome to the show, Drea.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit more about your background. Our first question always is, what made you become a nurse?
I love that question. My grandmother was my best friend growing up, and she always kind of told me that I had a caregiver's heart, and we bonded really early on in my life with her, and then I moved to Wisconsin to be closer to her, and it was her that really kind of pushed me into wanting to further the career. I was working in regular retail jobs. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, let's take the CNA class. We took the CNA class. And while I was working as a CNA, I really started taking interest in the different dynamics that were going on with the patients. And the cystic fibrosis population was really the one that kind of like stood out to me the most, was these folks that were born with this genetic condition that cuts their lives very short, but they were just the most spirited and amazing people. And they just kept teaching me about the different problems that they would face, the different organs that would be affected. And I was just so interested in what was going on that people were just like, Andrea, you'd be a really good nurse. So then I started the process of doing the prerequisites, going to nursing school, graduated, and became an RN. But I really, I credit my grandma for really pushing me to be a caregiver. But I really thank the cystic fibrosis population for, teaching me how to be that kind of nurse that really was interested in what was going on with them.
I always find it fascinating on how nurses start out. Sometimes it's a family member that invites them into the profession, or maybe it's taking care of a sick loved one that might interest you in the profession, or watching what the nurses did. And I always say that the best nurses are the ones that started out as CNAs.
For sure. I have to agree. When you really take an interest in it, it becomes interesting.
Exactly. So where did you go to school?
I went to Madison Area Technical College in Madison, Wisconsin. I've never really been a very good school attendee or scholar or anything like that. I have some learning difficulties, and that's because I had some head trauma as a child, and so I just was always very neurodivergent, and school was always difficult for me. So when I decided that I wanted to go to school, I did the technical school route because it was the least amount of time that I had to be in a classroom trying to learn that way. But working as a CNA really gave me the opportunity to see hands-on what was going on with certain situations. After 2 years of working on a really intense pulmonary floor with a lot of cystic fibrosis patients, I then transferred into a level 1 trauma ICU as a CNA. And so I was able to really witness what was going on. So when I was doing the anatomy and physiology classes and the microbiology, and then we got into the nursing clinicals and everything, like what we were learning in class, I was getting to see it firsthand and being a part of it, but not really having the same responsibilities as the nurse of any of the documenting. So it was a blessing that I got to have such a really thorough education for a technical school degree.
I think that's wonderful because I can't emphasize that enough about having those experiences. And my experience was starting out working in a lab. Actually, I worked for in a lab at the medical college in high school for 3 summers. To the point that my last job at the lab, they just gave me my own section. They're just like, yeah, take care of that. We'll just check it over because that's what I did. I worked in the lab. And so doing those things really prepared me. So when I became a CNA and then went to nursing school, I wasn't afraid to talk to patients. And that, to me,
Right.
I think that's so important. And I'm glad you tell your story because I want people out there to hear that maybe your training may look different from someone else, right? Maybe you struggle a little bit in some way in maybe taking the classes, maybe understanding the science and the math, but don't give up.
Mm-mm.
You can do it. You can
One thing that I
overcome.
had to learn was that I had to learn how to learn. I had to learn
Yes.
how to learn. And once I figured out what my learning style was, it made everything so much easier when I learned how to learn, and accepting that I needed to learn how to learn and embracing that was the key to changing everything for me in my college education. And I graduated, over a 3.5. So I mean, like, I did good in college once I figured out how I learned.
I wish they would teach more kids that earlier on. I had to, my first college career, I had to take a class to teach me how to study. And I
Hmm.
say that because I was used to just regurgitating things, right? You memorize it and regurgitate it. That's what school taught me. But when you get to college, now you have to integrate that learning. And so I had to learn how to study, not just to memorize, but to understand how to use the information that I was studying. And I really wish they taught that way when I was growing up because it would have been so much helpful because, I would read the book once or, you know, read a chapter, go take the test and pass because I didn't have to study it. It
Right.
was just there. I just could recall it. And so I learned how to study, and I think that's important. And I want our listeners to hear, particularly if you're a nursing student, learn how you need to learn. If it takes flashcards, make the flashcards. If you're the listener and you want to listen to tapes over and over again, do that. I said tapes, um, but videos or listen
One
to things over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the key things that was huge for me in my learning experience was the rule of three. See one, do one, teach one. See one happen in front of you, do it yourself, and then teach it back to somebody. Those doing it 3 times, any kind of skill that you're doing or interaction or even a conversation. And that's really kind of what led me into, where I'm at now, is that I've always been really good at having those awkward conversations because I've practiced them so many times with thousands of patients that I've experienced shared trauma with over the years. So I've been able to kind of have those. And even, if conversation skills and communication isn't your thing as a nursing student, practice with each other having those awkward conversations, and then literally ask each other questions about what they would do and really dig into it, so that you can kind of rehearse that, so the first time you're put on the spot, it's not so challenging or scary.
That's some of the same things we teach some of our patients in psychiatry and addictions, right? Practice what you're going to do when you walk in the room and someone offers you a drink, or practice how you're going to react when your family member pushes your buttons and triggers you.
Mhm.
Practicing those behaviors so that when you come to that situation, you're not scrambling to try to figure out what to do. You're kind of prepared for it.
Right.
And so, what was your first job out of nursing school?
I worked at the county jail.
Oh, wow.
I bet you weren't expecting that. No, I worked at the county jail on night shift, and I mostly worked in the intake area, doing booking. So any new arrestee that gets brought into jail has to be evaluated for medical needs before they are accepted into custody. So we'll go over medication review, check their vitals, most the blood pressure, and any diabetic we check to see what they're coming in at a blood sugar level. So we make sure that they're hemodynamically stable to be there. If they're detoxing from something, we get them set up on whatever detox protocol is needed for them. If they have pregnancy needs, if they have chronic conditions, we set up what needs that they need. We verify their medications the next so that they can have it within 12 to 16 hours. So there's a lot of things that like nurses in the jail do to make sure that the people that are coming in with chronic conditions are being cared for. We also make sure that anybody that's in a car accident gets the evaluation that they need prior to being taken in. And if they do come in with wounds, that we make sure that we're setting them up on wound care. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, inside of a jail, outside of just the law enforcement side. But that was my first job, and it was a really amazing experience to have that experience follow a level one trauma hospital, because it's a completely different atmosphere, and learning the lingo of how to communicate with people at that level was a learning curve for sure, but I was handheld into how to talk to people in this capacity versus talking to the PhDs and the academics that I was at a level one teaching hospital, and then those family members and stuff that are used to the academic lifestyle. So it was quite an experience having that as my first real RN job.
Having had some limited time, but some time in the correctional institution as a student, what struck me was how, I hate to say this, but in some ways, because I was in psychiatry, I knew about protocol as far as making sure safety risks and things like that. But what struck me was that in the jail system, you have to be very careful about what medications you can give and in what combination and all these different things, because my preceptor actually owned us. She was a nurse who owned a company that provided medical services to the jail. So that was interesting to hear. And so I know that triage part is very important, because you don't want something negative to happen to someone in the jail as well.
We need the honesty factor is probably the thing, is just being able to make the person, or not make them, but have the person in front of you feel comfortable enough to tell you what they're on, what they took, if there's something inside of them. Being able to like show that empathy in that moment of crisis when somebody is not in their best mood, not in their best mindset, being able to like relate to them and say, hey man, like I need to know what you're on, what you took, what you're going to come down from, or if there's something inside of you that is at risk at rupturing, we need to know these things. And so like having those skills is something that it takes a little bit of time to develop, but it's really important to treat every single person that's coming through like they are scared to death and they want to tell someone something that's going on inside of them, and just kind of knowing like, hey man, it's going to be okay. Like, I know this sucks right now, but this is not forever, but I really need you to just be honest with me, like, because I don't want you to get hurt coming down from whatever it is that you might be on.
Yes, having worked again, it's like knowing that they could be hiding something. I had a patient that came in, and she would hide pins in her skin so that she
Mm,
can use them to self mutilate later. And so she also hid things in her personal belongings. So she would say, "Oh, wait a minute, let me open up my wallet and get the razor out, my emergency razor, so you wouldn't hurt yourself." I appreciated that. So that building rapport is
yeah,
so very important.
yeah.
Okay, so then where did you go from there? Because it sounds like you've been doing a lot in the nursing field. How did you progress in your career?
So after the jail, there was an opportunity to take a residency because I'd only graduated with my associate's degree. I wasn't able to get right back into hospital nursing back in 2014. They weren't so eagerly accepting associate degree nurses into hospitals with no experience. So I got a position at a long-term acute care facility that had people that were coming off of ventilators, doing long weans, long, big, unhealing wounds, big owies, trying to help them get better. And so I stayed there for about a year until a position opened on a float pool inside of a larger hospital in town. And I stayed with them for about a year until I had an incident in 2017, which is where this book kind of comes in, where something happened where I witnessed something bad happened to a patient and I discovered it and I reported it, and I ended up suffering some whistleblower retaliation. And since then, I've kind of taken a very select role in where I try to pick my jobs because it was very morally injurious what happened to me during that episode. And so, like, from there, I kind of just continued in my nursing job because I love nursing, but it gave me a different lens as to like where I was going to spend my time. So then I started doing private duty nursing mostly. And I'm connected with a family that has a couple ladies that are the one I do non-vented home care patients. So I prefer my patients to still be able to be mobile in the community. And I go and I help the very chronically, critically ill patients as a private duty home nurse. But over the years, I've still continued to like work inside of a hospital as like maybe a PRN capacity. I'll pick a med surge floor because I really enjoy that kind of patient population. I'm really good with knowing my cystic fibrosis patients, that they're not med surg, they're more pulmonary, but like congestive heart failures, my diabetics, my renal disease patients, like that patient population I'm very comfortable with. The elderly, the geriatric, the psych patients I'm really comfortable with as well. So I tend to go back because I enjoy the patient populations. But the I don't even want to call it the politics, but the stress of staring at a computer screen and everything being kind of turned into the computer chart getting more of the attention than the patient has really drove me back into doing private duty nursing and staying out of the hospital. And then from that, my entrepreneurship has started to bloom more as I've wanted less corporate jobs and more time to enjoy being myself, being outside of the hospitals and doing what I enjoy doing. So like I might have over explained that a little bit.
No, that's quite all right. Because I was going to ask you now, because you mentioned going and doing private duty nursing. So is that through an agency, or are you independently contracted with the family?
So the way that it works in Wisconsin is that you apply for a national provider number, so the NPI number through the state of Wisconsin. There's a process to go through to do that. You can do that on usually on your state's website. With us, we go on, we apply for it, we get approved. It's a couple-week process, and then you go onto the state's billing website that works with Medicaid, Medicare services, and the state pays you to take care of these people because it's cheaper for them to have a home care nurse 24 hours a day than it would be for this kind of person. If this kind of person needed to be in an institution, like they would need to be at a really high acute level of care. So some of the patients I take care of, they are born and lived with a tracheostomy, and they have a tube feeding, and they're nonverbal and they're non-mobile. So for that kind of a patient inside of the hospital, they would likely end up down in the ICU or the IMC, occupying space of somebody that's actually sick. But these
Right.
people are not sick. They're just always like this. So they need somebody to take care of them in the community to make sure that they stay out of the hospital. But family members still need to go to work. They still need to be able to run errands and do things. So I've stayed connected with the family in the area where I pick up shifts with them. To help support my cost of living and my life. And I enjoy this family so much. They're a wonderful team of nurses that work together, and I've known them since 2019, and I'll continue to work with them as long as I'm welcome to. Um, and then there's another family that has a pediatric patient who, if that mom needs respite, like I can still come in and help them out if needed. So I choose to do it because I enjoy it. And out of all the jobs that I've had, like the private duty nursing has been the most rewarding because I know that these families would rather be in their homes.
So when you're doing your private duty nursing, then you're taking care of your own malpractice and um, your own benefits per se. So you're really like an independent contractor with your own business.
You are. You are your own
Okay.
agency.
And I think that's unique, and I think that's great because private duty nursing has kind of fallen to the wayside in a lot of places. So it's great that they have that program that they can get access to a nurse, because I know a lot of places, a lot of states are having that trouble of finding nurses that can work in the home, particularly for pediatric patients, vent patients, things like that. There's a lot of gaps that are out there.
There are, and the biggest way that a lot of our nurses are finding jobs and our families are finding nurses is through Facebook groups. And they'll just be like, in Wisconsin, there's a Wisconsin private duty nurse Facebook group, and patients will post their needs in it, and then nurses have connections to be able to find to see who needs help in that area. So that's one way that our community stays tight, being able to help each other out. And then a lot of the nurses, a lot of the families, they usually have a team of nurses that work together. And a lot of the nurses will end up like being like, hey, I got this case coming out of the hospital, or I know somebody. A lot of them, so they have these pals. They have there's usually a case manager for each of these families, and like that person will be able to kind of coordinate with other groups and just talk to us. So there's a big community. It's just we're a lot more quiet than the corporate nursing world, because there's so much negativity in the corporate nursing world right now that it's better to just kind of focus on the private duty patients that we have and keeping them out of the hospital setting. So we don't, a lot of us, there are some that do still work in the hospitals. Right now my only nursing role is doing in the private duty world, and so I tend to kind of like stay up to date with what's going on in the private duty world. So we just got a new online system where we're going to be able to clock in and out essentially online now and be able to do billing that way rather than on the other form that we were doing. So I try to stay up to date about like what's going on. So when you're in the know, you're in the know. But a lot of times, we kind of fall through the wayside because, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and that's the corporate hospital system right now, and that structure.
Okay. And so then when you're doing your uh, private duty, then how do you set your rates? I'm just curious. Does the state set your rate, or do you able to set your rate?
No, there's a standard wage that is for a non-vented patient versus a vented patient.
Okay. So a lot of people, like particularly if you're in Wisconsin or in other places and you're considering private duty nursing, I want you to listen to this conversation, because there are ways to get it done, and I'm pretty sure that there um, are others that can help. Do you work with any LPNs, or LVNs?
So they also have vent certified LPNs. They're able to do certain tasks. So they do have private duty LPNs that are available. It's up to what I'm not actually certain about the event LPN. So don't quote me on that exactly. I do know that we do have LPNs. I'm just trying to think of like if they ever did take any of our vent people. So I don't do vents. Like I said, I could if I wanted to. It's a $7 difference between if you take a vent case or a non-vent case. It's not, for me, it's really not about the money, although a lot of people do it for the money. I just prefer to have my patients being able to be mobile. So it's a great thing, but again, like you were saying about the taxes and stuff, you have to be on top of your taxes because
Mhm.
you're an independent contractor, so you do have to kind of be really on top of your taxes that way. This is a non-benefited position. It doesn't come with holidays or anything like that. So this job is a good one. A lot of our at the house that I was working or that I do work, we used to have three patients. And then it went down to two that live in the same apartment now, and so there's always a second nurse with me too. So there's two patients. They each have a 24-hour nurse. So we're never alone. We always have somebody to help us turn or move or do mobility or anything. But it's an interesting dynamic to have this availability to create your own schedule and work however many hours that day you can, and just be able to work for yourself as a nurse. A lot of the nurses that I work with are, they're married, they're on their husband or partner's benefits. They don't necessarily need the benefits, but they don't want to be a stay-at-home mom all the time anymore. So they've gone into getting their private duty nursing number, and they're able to get the training and connect with the family and work with them and be able to still maintain their license, but not be in the corporate setting. So there's ways to continue to have a nursing life and career without the corporate pressure and everything that's going on that's so toxic in our environment right now.
Yes, I wholeheartedly hear that, and it's nice to know that that is a option for nurses. And so I want nurses to hear this, that you don't have to leave the bedside, because you haven't left the bedside. You're still doing
No,
bedside
no.
nursing, but you happen to be doing it in someone's home for people who really do need you. And not saying that the people in the hospital don't need the nursing care, but there needs to be another option too. And I'm just curious because I know that there's a big push to do hospital at home, and I'm
Mhm.
just wondering if that may be another option for the private duty nurse to tap into that.
What I interviewed with a company up here about that, and it sounds like it's essentially what they're it sounds like a good idea, but they're trying to be more transactional, having it like these 2-hour visits, these 2 to 4 hour visits. And I don't know if they would be able to do that, because a lot of the people that go into private duty nursing, they want to work with the family. I think that there could be room for businesses to if there's a market to tap into for people that want to be creative and be able to work in that, like create their own agency. But a lot of the nurses that are currently doing private duty, they're like, I want 4 days a week, 8-hour shifts with this family, and the family is willing and able to work with them, they'll do it.
Well, and then there's the other portion, because I spoke with a nurse that they have a concierge service where they'll bring you over for surgery, and the nurse will be there to take care of you, do your post op. You stay there, you have access to the team to go back to get your post op visit, and then they fly you back home.
Hmm.
So, what I'm saying is that there's so many opportunities out there for nurses. I don't want nurses to feel like they're pigeonholed and stuck. And a
No.
lot of nurses feel like they're stuck in one field or one role, and they can't move. Even if your hospital's the only hospital in your city or town, you can find other things to do with your nursing career. So my philosophy has always been, leave your job, don't leave your profession.
Right.
So tell me about the books. How did the books come about?
So back in 2017, I observed this situation with a patient that really left a mark on my career. That I won't dive too deep into to what all happened. I describe it in the book, but out of it came questions on what would I suggest could change differently about how this could have been prevented. This could have been prevented. And I started talking to my manager, another manager, the chief safety officer, and then it got up to the chief nursing officer about what I saw that day and what she thought would be beneficial. And out of it came ideas on how to change the nursing care model to be something that's more sustainable about providing medical attention during an assessment and having a teamwork approach to providing assessments, and so that we could streamline the assessment and documentation portion of the nurse's day a little bit easier. And I described it to her in a different staffing model and getting a little bit more creative with the 24-hour period of time and how to return back to three shifts in a day for nurses to choose from. And it's out of the box thinking. It was creative. She loved it. Unfortunately, like the next day when I went back to talk to my manager about it, an email had been sent out, and it was a very positive email, although my manager was like very upset that like I had spoken to someone else, and it turned into some miscommunication, and I ended up feeling like there was some retaliation about me going and speaking my thoughts. And so then I ended up leaving that job, but this idea of how we could restore teamwork, help young nurses feel more confident in their assessment skills, provide safer patient medical attention, take some of the documentation burden off, create this safer environment, like it wouldn't leave me alone. And so I would bring this up over time to different managers, and they would tell me, "You're crazy. This isn't how we do things. You need to go back to school." And I've tried to get my bachelor's degree 3 different times, but there's always been something that would happen that would be like, God would tell me, like, this isn't the right path for you to be on right now. And I wasn't able to complete it. So I just kind of kept having these ideas and these insights. And for 7 years now, I have been denying trying to do this book because I kept thinking, how do I get this message across? And then my aunt suggested to me to write a book, and I decided to write it. And then earlier this year, I suffered the loss of my dog, and that was really traumatic. And I was just like, okay, I'm not going to finish this book now. And then I ended up deciding after that I needed to take a huge adventure in my life. And I resigned from my position that I had as a hospice case manager. And then I didn't have any shifts with my private duty clients at that time. Like I was just doing mostly the hospice work at that time. That was earlier last year. And I sold my house, and I got a new car. I adopted a puppy, and I traveled the East Coast for 5.5 months trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself. If I wanted to be a nurse still, how do I want to continue to live my life on earth? Because, time is so precious and life is so precious. And what do I want to do with myself? And so I just really kind of leaned into the idea to keep pushing this as a book idea, because I kept talking to different executives about my insights, and they would always tell me, why aren't we doing this? This is such a good idea. You need to talk to this one. And I kept getting pushed along to different people, but I wasn't actually talking to anyone. It was just, here's another Zoom meeting, here's another phone call. And I kept feeling like I was burning out pitching to people, but not doing anything. So I decided to just put my thoughts into a book. And I was able to do that, but it was not without doing a lot of healing first, a lot of my own healing from my own personal traumas, as well as the shared traumas that I've experienced with my patients, as well as the caregiver burnout that I've experienced being such a dedicated nurse all these years to the front line, because I love it. And, showing up in a crisis and showing up to be there for somebody, that takes a lot, because not everybody would do the jobs that these nurses do. And it's very draining. So I was not able to really get the books done until I did a lot of real invasive emotional healing. And I'll tell you about that later if you want, but it was a lot. So after I finished the first book, and I started working with the team to get it together, I just felt the energy flowing through me to tell my life story about what I have been through to create who I am today. And, I decided to share those stories because they open a perspective and new conversations that really need to be discussed in today's world, because the polarized view that we have are just 2 points and this is a different perspective. And so I decided to write the second book, and I was able to write that one out. In 12 days I put it together, and then I just had that released. It was just able for print about a week ago, so I'm really excited that they're both finally out. I'm really excited to share the stories with people and to let them know, like, this is what I've been through, that I want to share my experience, strength, and hope with you, so that you can see that the sun will come up tomorrow, things will get better. We have been through some really, really rough times together as a collective, but if we all start positively focusing on what is something that is possible right now, we can achieve it. And in the struggle to change healthcare, I present in chapter 2 a dream for the future hospital experience and what that would look like, and how easy it would be if we had everybody on the same page, how soon we could replicate it and scale it and bring a lot of help to the nurses where they need it the most, which is at the front line, in the hospitals, at the bedside during assessment.
I think that would be so great if we can start with our next generation, right?
Yes,
We put in the nursing school so they can start to teach thinking a different way. Because
exactly.
unfortunately, right now in healthcare, it seems like everything is so profit driven that people often are like left to the wayside, or invisible. And so it's all about clicking that button on the medical record to make sure that you get that billable whatever it is, right?
I think that we've ended up teaching that. I don't think that really any of our providers want to do that. I think that we talk about that so much as that being what's going on, that we're missing the point on a lot of the other things. That, yes, there needs to be two people doing an assessment, because if my eyes are on the computer, they're not on the respiratory rate or the wound or the pressure that needs to be on this area of a bleeding patient. My attention is not in the right area. And so, what I talk about in the book is, our medical attention needs to be two people, and eyes in the sky and a boots on the ground. And so that people are able to focus on what they need to focus on. Because just like that, if we focus on the problem being a money problem in the hospital, that's all that people are going to talk about, is that it's a money and a financial thing, when the truth of it is that it's an attention and a focus thing. People are not paying attention and focusing where they need to focus. And so if we shift the focus and the mindset into where we really need to be focusing, the money and everything is going to still, it's still going to be there, but we're going to have less waste, because we're going to have people catching things in assessments sooner than they are right now. And we're going to have shorter hospitalization stays. We're going to have better preventative care done if we can change the care model into providing actual medical attention again, and utilizing our resources the best ways that we can, which is creative scheduling and overlapping and working together as a team again. And that's what I really want to hope and inspire, is to tell people, like, yes, we can focus on the dollars and the cents about these things all day long, but if you focus on the problems, all you're going to get is problems. So if you focus on the solutions, on how we can solve this, we're going to start achieving that. It's in the mindset. They say if you think negative, you're going to get the negative, and if you think the positive, you're going to achieve it. So I'm really just trying to help bring the collective into a different conversation, so that we can start working towards some positive outcomes.
I think most clinicians go into the healthcare field with the idea that you're going to be there to help people.
I do.
And one of the things that takes us away from that is that need to click a button, document, make sure. I mean, I'm a legal nurse consultant, so working as a legal nurse consultant, seeing the aftermath when things don't get done. And I think what we need to do is to take a step back
Mhm.
and to really look at how we should be driven by outcomes. Did the patient get better? Did the wound heal? Is their breathing better? And also then preventing those things, of looking at, okay, this person has it been moved or turned, or how can we help them to do that and accomplishing those things and looking at that. But unfortunately, the privatization with private equity groups purchasing hospitals and things like that, everything tends to be more money driven.
Mhm.
um, and that is something we need to change. I agree, and I think it's taking some forward thinking healthcare professionals, nurses, and certainly others to see that and to see the benefit of making those changes, because it could save money, it could save lives, it could actually allocate the resources better. I remember the shift from the 8 hour shifts to the 12-hour shifts and what happened.
Yeah, I do too. I remember
And
paper charts.
yes, and the Cardex.
Yeah, yeah. It
The
wasn't the
Card.
worst time, it really wasn't, because if we look
Mhm.
at this too, and I talk about this in my book, is that, you know, our electronic medical record as a collective is just about 10 years old. It was only decided that they wanted all electronic medical records by 2014. So that's how
Yeah.
young our record still is. And in such a short time, how much of a reductionist mindset have we developed, because we can mine that data in that electronic medical record infinitely, but a human body can only be, saved so many times. So we really, the focus is not in the right spot sometimes. And it's like, if we change some of these conversations to more the quality of life that is available for everybody, if we just start having these awkward conversations, we be better support people to each other, we acknowledge elephants in the room when we talk about them. If people start actually taking their health a little bit more seriously as a collective, like, we can start utilizing our resources better. If our hospitals were not so stressed out and our nursing homes so stressed out and everything, they would be able to be offering up more, surgeries. I was looking at, in Madison, they were really upset that they weren't offering gender affirming surgeries, and it wasn't anything to do with any kind of political statement. It was, they simply don't have the resources available to be providing cosmetic surgeries of this extent to the population, because we're so stretched thin. I'm sure that they would love to take money and help these people feel comfortable in their own skin and do these things for them, but right now, we don't have the resources. We don't have the nurses to take care of you. We don't have these things to offer these elective, very invasive surgeries. So, if they want to make more money, they really need to look at the root problems. And in my opinion, the root problem is the assessment portion and the documentation burden, as well as the shift, the schedule. And I'm really hoping that hospital systems will read chapter 2, and they'll start competing on who can get it accomplished quicker.
Well, and here's the thing. What I see it as a systems problem.
Mhm.
As a system, we are geared toward doing certain things, and I think we need to change how we operate as a system. If we were to implement safer staffing ratios, for say, let's say we were to implement changes in how the scheduling would be, we could change how healthcare is delivered and embrace technology. I'm not anti technology. In fact, I think we
Mhm.
can utilize technology a lot better.
I
And I'm
agree.
a big science fiction person, and I can't wait for the day when I have a tricorder like on Star Trek and I can just zap you and figure out what's wrong with you, right? Or we
And
can
yeah,
get medicines by a hypo spray that we don't have to give injections, and it just goes to the skin or however. And so I think technology has its place. I think we just use it wrongly, and our systems are the problem, not the technology, but how we utilize it.
it's not even the nurses, it's not even the doctors, it's not even really the insurance companies. It's just that we have drifted so far away from human nature and understanding how to work together, how to communicate with each other, how to have awkward conversations, how to have bedside manner. And then COVID really did not do us a service at all, because it taught everybody how to work independently in isolation and spend as least time in a room as possible. And so that, further stressed out a lot of people. And we just kind of need to, don't want to say reinvent the wheel, but we need to start having history repeat itself a little bit and be just kind of like, hey, we're going to go back to basics on a few of these things, and then we're going to upgrade you in some other areas, because look what happened while you were in COVID, the COVID time warp here, where you're stuck in this mindset. Look how much technology came available, what everybody else was doing while we were stuck taking care of people and healing and saving lives. Look what they did out there, and we've got so many cool resources that we can utilize. It's just they're not, people aren't like communicating in the right areas, and I'm really hopeful that I can give a good positive shift into the whole collective, so that we can have something positive to work towards, and just have a lot of people just start leaning into it.
I can tell you from personal experience, because because I'm in psychiatry, outpatient psychiatry. We closed our building during the pandemic and we had to work from home. So for about 2 years, I was working exclusively from home. And so I came in and they called us back to, to slowly come back in. So I was working one day in the office. And it was like, we're like, hi, you're not on a little tiny screen. I haven't seen you in 2 years. Um, should we come out of our office? Because we still had our masks on and everything. And
Yeah.
it was just so weird. And someone would knock on my door and I would just jump, because I'm like not used to having someone in my space. And I'm like, why are you here? you know, it was a
Mhm.
transition. And I think that's where we really need to think about, how are we relating to one another and how are we working back together. There is a new normal, right? We aren't back to how we used to be. We used to go and meet physically in front of each other to have our team meetings, and now it's on Microsoft Teams, right? And so, looking at that, it's great that I can talk to you, and you're in Wisconsin, I'm in Indiana, and I've got more people that I can talk to from around the world. That's wonderful. But that person to person, being able to touch someone, that's still important.
Mhm.
Yes. So let's transition here. So if you had a piece of advice for a budding entrepreneur or a nurse who wants to maybe start her own personal nurse business or private duty nurse business, or maybe wants to become an author, or any of those things, what would you tell a budding entrepreneur?
I would tell them to, really lean into it, and really try to keep going with it, keep a positive mindset. The people that are the naysayers and the negative ones that are out there are the ones that are not happy with themselves, and they're going to try to bring you down and make you feel like you can't do it. But if you put yourself in the right environment with the right music, the right, meditative atmosphere that you need to kind of stay in to kind of keep your flow going, it's gonna come easier. It's gonna come much quicker than if you keep talking to a whole bunch of different people that are going to tell you that you're crazy or that you can't do it. Just having the right support network and being in the right environment, making sure that you're comfortable, and not placing yourself where you're trying to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because what you think is what is your reality. And if you're thinking any kind of negativity, or you know things that are impossible, they're gonna feel impossible, because it's a mindset thing. So there's a lot of times in your life that you really feel like it's never going to get any better, but you just have to start looking for the solutions and focusing on those, and looking at every problem as a question as to how am I gonna get over this. And anyone that tells you that you can't do it, you just look back at them and say, watch me.
You heard it there. Watch me. I love that. So, how would our listeners, one, get a hold of your books, and two, how would they get a hold of you if they want to follow up and have a conversation?
So right now my author page is live. It's dreavanessa.com. My books are available through links on that website. They're on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. They're both on Kindle. The Struggle to Change Healthcare is available on audiobook as well. My consulting website is in development, and I'm excited to announce that those are going to have some webinars and modules, and there's a lot more to come with that. That is it's a very exciting project. I'm very passionate about it, and I'm really excited to see this all come to life. So I'm just getting started. I'm just scratching the surface, and I am looking forward to meeting so many people and helping them kind of just transition into viewing the empowerment that comes from owning your role in a healthcare experience.
Well, that sounds wonderful and that sounds great. And I'll be sure to put your information here. It'll be in the show notes, the links to her website, and also where you can get her books. I want to thank you, Drea, for your time. And thank you for those listening to the Nurse Shark Academy show or watching us on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And if you're listening to us through Podbean or on Amazon or any other platform, please go ahead and subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes that we have. And go ahead and leave us a comment. We'd love to talk to you and get to know you. All right, I want to thank you for your time, Drea, and as always, we look forward to having great conversations with nurse entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
Nurses, are you ready for more? My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining confidence, skills, and the freedom to live your life on your own terms. Assisting you in achieving your goals through tailored advice, continuous learning, and a collaborative approach is at the heart of everything I do. Stop being eaten alive. Come feel the sun. Be a nurse shark. Thank you for listening to the Nurse Shark Academy show wherever you get your podcasts or watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you'll know when all of our episodes come out. If you want further information, you can contact us on the nursesharkacademy.biz.